Aaron Rodgers will probably end up back with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but his continued uncertainty will have an impact on the team. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert Lauren Cox on today's show. Football is back. That's right. 10 football teams will be able to start their off-season activities this week, including the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Baltimore Ravens, any team that got a new head coach. Spoiler alert if you weren't aware of that. But we're going to talk about the big questions for these teams heading into organized team activities, which teams need to win the quickest, and which coaches might be on the hot seat after year one. Before we dive in, I do want to thank you for making the Locked On NFL your first listen. Thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. Lauren, listen, I know that Aaron Rodgers is going to end up back with the Steelers. They probably already have it worked out behind the scenes, this and that. So when I say that there's Aaron Rodgers uncertainty, there probably isn't. Like last year, he took his time to figure it out, but they probably know they're destined to be back together for this season. But even if that's the case, I still think it has an impact on the team because he's not there. The players can't know for certain if he's going to come back. And if you're a quarterback and a guy who has a long relationship with your brand new head coach doesn't respect the process enough to at least give you an answer at this point as to what he's doing. You don't even have that contract and roles and when he's coming in and all that. You don't have to have all that stuff figured out. He hasn't even given you a firm public commitment yet. I'm sorry, but I think it's not that far-fetched to say it might be hard for some of those guys in the locker room to buy into the coach when he can't even get Rodgers to commit yet. They don't know who their quarterback is.
Well, and part of it's just that building of relationships with teammates.
Exactly.
And sure, the guys that were there last year, like, or have been around for a while, might be able to pick that up. But like when you go out and trade for a receiver like Michael Pittman, like you want him and Rodgers building that connection right away. Like that's a significant investment for that offense. And to a lesser extent, somebody like Rico Dowdle in the backfield too. Like,
yes,
you don't need a lot of chemistry to hand the ball off necessarily, but there's tons of option routes for running backs out of the backfield that require a QB and running back to be on the same page. Not that they're doing full practices right now or anything, but it's just about sort of having those conversations and communicating and being in the same building, being in the same room, building that relationships to kind of have your brains on the same wavelength. Like that process starts now, and that stuff just takes time that you can't just accelerate through and try and rush.
And who's notorious for yelling at their teammates? Aaron Rodgers. Well, maybe if you would have given a commitment to the team before the draft, which remember back when everybody was saying that this was going to be done before free agency, like the Steelers just wanted certain, now we're going to get to the NFL draft and it might not be done. Now watch, it'll get done on, Monday night after we recorded this and I'll sound like a lunatic. But again, that would be a good thing for the Steelers because you're right. It's about the chemistry you build with your teammates. It's about the togetherness. It's about the camaraderie that you have. And it goes beyond just the emotional stuff too. Again, like I said, Rodgers is known for being demonstrative and yelling at his teammates, he's throwing his hands up and doing all, you should have cut this way. When we read the defense, you're supposed to go this way. He's always complaining and having bad body language about his teammates. Well, maybe your teammates would be more locked in with what you want, especially new ones like you're saying with Pittman and Dowdle and, Darnell Washington is banged up. Who's going to be their tight end too for the time being? Like, there are so many there's a new offense, new coaches. There are so many reasons for Rodgers to be in the building early. His final years in the NFL, probably his final year in the NFL. Don't you want to go through that process one more time and just soak it all in? No, he doesn't. No, he's not giving a commitment to the Steelers. So it's like he may be locked in there. And that's something that our guys over at Locked On Steelers think that he already kind of tipped his hand with what he said on the McAfee show.
If Aaron wants to pursue free agency in some sort of way or see what the market is going to give him in terms of a dollar figure, I just hope that it's wrapped up by, next Friday at the absolute latest and we're not dragging this thing out.
Here's another thing that I think tips the hand as far as what's going on here. How many times has Aaron Rodgers said on Pat McAfee, I don't need this stuff. When I'm done, I'm going to disappear. You're never going to hear from me again. So if we're still hearing from Aaron Rodgers, something tells me he's not done yet.
Now, I've used that clip before from back in March because it's such a great clip, and it really does hammer home. I think that Rodgers will be back with the Steelers. He knows it. They know it, all that. But waiting on him to make that official and hard commit to the relationship, I think it does have a negative impact on the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, I get that Rodgers is coming at this and saying, I don't really need to be at every offseason practice. Like I know Mike McCarthy and I know how he runs his system, but like it is a brand new quarterbacks coach that Rodgers has never worked with before. It's a offensive coordinator who was with him in Green Bay as tight ends coach. So there's at least a relationship there, but not like a headset sideline communication type of relationship, like a functioning QB OC relationship, even if he's not calling the plays and McCarthy's calling it, however it works. Like those are still important roles and relationships to build and develop. Like no one's saying Rodgers needs to be in there right now, leading the workouts and being the hardest worker, like at this age of the process, but just like be there, be around and be like a sure thing for everyone to be able to rely on. It's not that much of an ask. He can still take it easy and not push himself too much and be a part of the organization and the team right now.
I agree, and that removes the just general uncertainty in the locker room of who our leader is, I think every player in that locker room would understand Aaron Rodgers is 42, 43 years old. He's not going to go as hard as we go. I think the players would respect that and understand that, but the cloudiness of the situation, I think, makes things worse. Now, thinking about quarterbacks out of these 10 teams that are getting things going, Lauren, I know you had another quarterback that you have your eye on as organized activities kind of start kicking off around the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, as teams start to kind of get rolling here, it's all the teams, of course, that have new head coaches, right? So it kind of gives us a nice little, kind of a nice mixed spread of teams that we can choose between here. And for me, like I look at this group and feel like the Arizona Cardinals is the other big quarterback question mark team where it's just like I don't really know what to expect there. And if anything, like I'm looking at some of these other young quarterbacks on other teams that have more of a set direction and thing like, hey, they're all in different positions to try and figure out exactly when and where they're going to take those steps forward.
Yeah, like a Jaxson Dart, for example, with the Giants has to take a step forward this year. And that's when I will be honest, it seems like he's set up to take a step forward. There's a lot of momentum, and we'll talk about the Giants more here in a second because I think they're a team that does need to win out of the gate. But that will include Jaxson Dart taking a step forward and being like he was at the beginning of the season rather than the end of the season. And I'm curious, I was not high on the offensive coaching staff that was put together by John Harbaugh. I think he got left holding the bag thinking that he could have Todd Monken, and then Monken got the job with the Browns, which I don't think that a lot of people expected. And he ended up, with Matt Nagy, and he's got Brian Callahan on his coaching staff as the quarterback coach. And I'm just looking at, some guys who are maybe overqualified, but we're not certain if they're any good. So things could go bad if Matt Nagy and Brian Callahan turn out to, not only are they not head coaches, they're not very good offensive coordinators either. Like that could happen. And if that happens with Dart, he could be in a tough spot.
Yeah, the Nagy thing is interesting because we never really got a perfect answer for him because he was always under Andy Reid's shadow. But then when he goes to Chicago, you add the head coaching duties, and there were times when he was kind of giving away play calling in Chicago and was kind of trying to navigate how hands-on should I be as the offensive coordinator play caller versus hands-off as the head coach. So to see him in this role where he can be fully hands-on offensive coordinator without having to be looking over the whole roster and leading the whole team, I think it'll be I think there's reason to think it could be different or more successful. It could also not, but I just think it's not guaranteed to be the same failure again. It's a different set of circumstances that could produce a different result. And I think he's got some offensive merit and brain there. I know in Chicago he talked about how he maybe did too much delegating at some point and didn't have enough control there, just trying to figure out how to kind of mix and manage that. I think he comes now in his second opportunity away from the Chiefs saying, I've got a better, clearer vision of how I should run things. He was taking in a lot of outside input and a lot of voices and maybe a little bit too much and not just sticking to his identity and what he believed. There was kind of too many cooks in the kitchen. Well, now he is the cook in the kitchen that in theory that should produce better results. How good, we'll see.
Yeah, we will have to see and add him to the list of people who need the Giants to win early. That's all I know. And now they're going to have to deal with not only the expectations of winning early, but Dexter Lawrence, the talented interior defensive lineman, has requested a trade. Do want to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Financial stress is something that a lot of people are carrying right now, and it's not just about the numbers. It can affect your sleep, your relationships, your overall mental health in ways that build up over time. And the reality is, struggling with money doesn't mean you failed. Sometimes it just means you haven't had the right kind of support. It's something that I've thought about, how easy it is to put pressure on myself financially without really talking about it. The stress that comes with trying to figure everything out on your own, the expectation to feel like you have everything, quote unquote, together, and how the pressure can spill into other areas of your life. With over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 6 million people served, BetterHelp makes it easier to get matched and start focusing on what you need. When life feels overwhelming, therapy can help. Sign up and get 10% off at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Lauren, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. Again, football is back, folks. We have 10 teams around the NFL, the teams with new head coaches that get to start their off-season activities this week. The Ravens started on Monday. Of course, Ravens always cheating, get that extra day on everybody else, and then everybody else gets to start on Tuesday. It's not the only time the Ravens have cheated the system this all season. We see you, Baltimore. We know what you're doing, but I'm going to leave Baltimore off this list, although we'll get to them in just a second. My top two teams, Lauren, that have to win right away out of this group of 10. Number one, the New York Giants, who we were just talking about. And now you get the trade request from Dexter Lawrence, which throws a wrench into it. But my overall point here is it's perceived that the Giants have a really good roster. Like, most people look at it and say, you know, you got great talent on the defensive line with Brian Burns. Abdul Carter started blowing up a little bit at the end of the year last year. You, in theory, have Dexter Lawrence on the interior. You have Malik Neighbors. You have Andrew Thomas, Jermaine Illuminor. You have some key players at some premium positions. Dart looked pretty good last year. If Scatterbo could come back and be healthy, like, there's a lot to like. But at the end of the day, most of the hype comes from John Harbaugh. Everybody thinks Harbaugh has been hired. He's going to change everything. And that has Patricia Traina from Locked On Giants pretty hype about the Harbaugh impact as well.
The Giants, why should we believe that they are closer to competing? We can start with the coaching staff. All right. You have heard me say on this program, if you are an everydayer, that coaching matters. And the proof the last few years has kind of been in the pudding, in that you look at the number of Giant players who have either been slow to develop or who have regressed. And you sit there and you say, what exactly are these guys being taught? How are they being developed? You look at guys who were with the Giants who went to other teams and became really solid players. And you sit there and you say, what is going on with the coaching and the development? All right. I think it's been fair to question if the coaching across the board has been solid for the Giants. So John Harbaugh, in putting together his coaching staff, every single one of those guys who's going to lead a position group has done it before at the NFL level. A lot of those guys, or several, I should say, have played the game at the NFL level. And if you don't think that's going to make a difference, then I don't know what to tell you.
And it should make a difference. Again, what she just said right there is why the expectation for the Giants is so high, which is also why I think there is pressure for them to win right away. If they come out and they go 2-6, or they go, 3-7 or something like that in the first 10 games of the season, people are going to be like, man, is Harbaugh going to be able to turn this around? We thought they had more talent than that. Like, this isn't a rebuild. So the Giants are a team that I look at and I think they need to win right away to prove, proof of concept, basically.
Yeah, and I think there's sort of the opposite side of this from Harbaugh, where it's like coming from Baltimore, they get so much credit for that front office consistently building good teams and getting good players there. And not that there weren't flaws and they struggled to get receivers and stuff, but like generally speaking, they weren't short on overall talent on those rosters.
Yes.
And they're sort of this like, how much was Harbaugh and how much was it just a good team? And maybe he certainly wasn't a bad coach. No one's arguing that, but that was it great coaching or was it good coaching and great players? And New York, there's
institutions,
there's still going to be it's not like this is a clean slate either where there's good players in New York now too. So you can't fully say, oh, this will be all Harbaugh or all not Harbaugh, but still like it'll be a more clean measurement of like, yeah, was this Baltimore or was it not? And honestly, to tie this to the Ravens having a new head coach too, like Jesse Minter will be the other end of that spectrum of like, okay, how much was Harbaugh lifting the group of guys there versus just being a good group of guys that Minter can come in and keep rolling, and now vice versa for Harbaugh here. So yeah, I'm with you 100%, especially just young quarterback and entering that second season. Everyone's looking for growth and excitement and development, and they added a couple weapons here and there and still have draft picks. There's going to be a lot of excitement there that I think there's going to be some hype and some higher expectations than maybe there should be for a 4-13 football team. I don't know.
No, that's the point. It's the expectations are like a lot of people are going to have the Giants making the playoffs. A lot of people are going to think the Giants are going to be this year's Bears or this year's Jags or this year's Patriots. Like the Giants are the team that everybody kind of puts in that they're going to go from top 5 to, the playoffs and things like that. And that sort of expectation is going to create more disappointment if it doesn't work out. Again, if they win 6 games, they win 7 games all year, it may be looked at as a failure. Harbaugh isn't good enough. Is he going to have to make changes on the offensive coaching staff? Is this and that? You can already see it coming if they kind of underachieve based on the standards that maybe are a little too overhyped. But either way, that's the way it goes. It's funny you brought up the Ravens, Lauren. I know that was one of the teams that kind of stood out to you when you looked at a team that needs to win early. You were hitting on it, but what exactly makes you pick the Ravens as a team that needs to get off to a fast start?
Yeah, to me, when you make the move off of Harbaugh to Minter, right, it's a bold franchise-changing decision to say, hey, what we've had isn't good enough, and we need to be, therefore, better. And so you're going to want some pretty quick proof of concept of like, hey, did we make the right decision? Or especially if New York is doing well, and you're looking around, you start like this past season when they started, 1-5, and it's like, uh-oh. I mean, then it was easy to blame Harbaugh, the sky is falling, but like now it's like, uh-oh, did we maybe give up too soon on that? And did we have a good thing that we didn't realize, the devil you know versus the devil you don't, and now things aren't going in the right direction? Like to have the veteran players there buy into this first-time head coach right away with some early success, as opposed to if there's some struggles, it's like, does this guy know what he's doing? Harbaugh didn't do this, or Harbaugh always had that, and there's going to be that shadow looming over Minter until he earns some of that early success.
No, I think you're 100% right. It's kind of like that in Pittsburgh too. Another team that you were kind of bringing up when we were prepping for the show. They do so well, so consistently every single year that if you were to fall off that, it's going to have people having buyer's remorse really fast. Like, oh no, did we not know how good we had it? When you have a guy like Tomlin, you have a guy like Harbaugh, that sort of shadow is the right word. The shadow of those guys will heighten the expectations quite a bit. And I especially think on the offensive side of the ball, if Lamar doesn't come out right away and have that success, they'll look at Declan Doyle. I know, Lauren, you know Declan Doyle from Chicago times. I have my eye on Declan Doyle. He could be public enemy number 1 very soon if Lamar. You know how the public defends Lamar Jackson. They're going to turn on Declan Doyle pretty quickly if he doesn't get them off to a good start. But speaking of that kind of offensive thing, the other team that I wanted to mention was the Buffalo Bills. Because the Bills, similarly to like what you're saying, you take Sean McDermott, who's been a staple in Buffalo for years, gets them to the playoffs every year, one of the more successful runs in Buffalo Bills franchise history, Josh Allen to an MVP. You basically just said it was all his fault. The reason we didn't get to it, we're going to keep the offensive coordinator. We're just going to change the defense. We're going to keep the GM. We're going to keep most of the players. It was all his fault. Now he's gone. And I think it's funny that a lot of the conversation around Buffalo this offseason is actually about the offense when that's the coach that they kept around. And listen to Locked On Bills, they were talking about it too.
I'm really fascinated to see what the Bills run-pass ratio is going to be moving forward because obviously the last 2 years with Joe Brady as the permanent or offensive coordinator, the Bills were like the most run aggressive team in the NFL. And I wonder how much of that is a Sean McDermott mandate. And then there's this layer. James Cook is a paid running back. Well, that happened this past year, and all of a sudden he got 342 touches, which is up from a previous career high in 2023 of 281. Well, now they have DJ Moore on this $24.5 million deal. Like, that is a commitment to a receiver that we haven't seen since Diggs. And when they had Diggs, that guy got looks, right? He had 150 targets. Like, it was part of the deal, man. So the McDermott layer is gone. You have a paid running back, but you've also got a paid wide receiver in a big way. I can be convinced that the pass rate comes up a little bit.
And my thing is, maybe that's the case, but like, Joe Brady's been running the offense the whole time. Why couldn't he just make those changes himself? Are you saying that Sean McDermott wouldn't allow him to make those changes in the offensive philosophy? That's what I'm not getting.
Yeah, I mean, DJ Moore's obviously a big change, but they had, like he mentioned, someone like Diggs.
How big? How big? I'm skeptical.
But I mean, well, just in terms of what they had at wide receiver, in terms of talent,
yes,
an upgrade from they were so desperate there, not desperate, but
fair.
Yeah. I don't think DJ Moore is going to come in and be a 1,500-yard receiver, but he'll be an upgrade over what they've had there. Like, so there's some room for things to change slightly there, but I agree. Like, it shouldn't need to be drastically different in Buffalo this season. I do think, though, that does bring its own set of pressure. I was just looking back through the last 7 years. Sean McDermott has started either 3-1 or 4-0 in the first 4 weeks of every single season.
There you go.
They've been a fast start team under McDermott, and if they're not under Joe Brady, that's going to be the early whispers and that shadow again of Sean McDermott of like, did we make the right call?
No, there's 100% going to be that. And it's just, again, like we were talking about, the shadow makes it even more difficult. And now you're adding in that factor. That's a great nugget right there. Fans are used to seeing early wins, and if things don't go good early, the Buffalo fans could, get that buyer's remorse, and then the faith wanes, and the coaches can feel it, and the players can feel it, and everyone's like, oh no, what did we do? One of these teams that we're talking about right here that needs to start fast is not going to start fast, and there's going to be a lot of panic button pressing very early on. But I think that there are a couple of coaches who might get that panic button pressed even earlier than that, and the hot seat could be there after the very first year. We'll talk about that right now. All right, Lauren, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. Again, 10 teams in the NFL starting their offseason activities on Monday and Tuesday. All the teams with the new head coaches. Football is back, folks. So exciting. We're going to have players on fields. We're going to have football-related activities going on. A lot of team building and things like that. I remember last year the Titans were playing freeze tag and things like that. And, of course, that didn't backfire or go poorly in any way, tug of war and all that stuff. But anyways, outside of teams having field days, hopefully there are some good coaches get things started early. But we look at some coaches who could potentially be on the hot seat after one season. And I start with Todd Monken. And I think the big reason why is they just simply don't have a good enough quarterback in Cleveland. It could doom the entire season. And my guy Spencer German from Locked On Browns talked about that recently.
There's Deshaun Watson, the veteran who has the most experience and arguably you could say the most talent, at least at some point in his career of the group. But can he still reclaim any old version of himself? That's very much to be determined. And I tend to think it's not going to happen. And then you have two guys coming off of rookie seasons with minimal experience in the NFL, a lot to still learn in a lot of ways for each of them that both have different skill sets and do different things well and different things not well. So it's a unique group. And I operated most of this offseason feeling like adding another young quarterback to the mix just didn't make a lot of sense because it was essentially a group that already had some young players in it.
I just think the quarterback situation is so bad for Cleveland. If Myles Garrett were to get traded, they could be even worse this year than they were last year. I think, personally, that Kevin Stefanski is a better coach than Todd Monken. Like, I truly believe that. So I could see the Browns having a terrible season. If there's some extra controversy off the field, they trade Myles Garrett at the deadline, things go, I could see Todd Monken getting fired after 1 year.
Yeah, I think if there's any organization that you can't put that past, it's the Cleveland Browns, just with their head coaching history. But,
yep.
But yeah, I think there's also two other factors here. One is that it kind of felt like they landed on Todd Monken when the game of musical chairs ran out and there weren't any other coaches left.
Yes.
It was I don't want to, it's insulting to say he was just sort of like the filler backup option, but I think they had tried a few other coaches and they got turned down. So it's like, well, we still need a date to the prom. Who's available? And they got Todd Monken. But, if next year the coaching cycle resets, and instead of there being 10 openings, there's 2 or 3, then maybe the Browns say, well, we can get a better option this way around. And then the other thing I'll point to is that if crap hits the fan this season, like, does the general manager get fired? And then, well, the GM's gone, Andrew Berry. So then new GM comes in and they're going to want their own head coach pick as well. I don't want to get saddled with Todd Monken for a year before we fire him. Right. And like just trying to get GM and head coach on the same timeline. Like that to me adds another factor here of like all the reasons why Monken could easily, I don't want to say easily, but would make maybe the most sense as a potential one and done this year.
And here's another reason, another log that I'll throw on the fire of Todd Monken's hot seat. What if they do get their new quarterback of the future? They've been saving those picks. They've been looking at 2027. What if they get Arch Manning? Are they going to start him in his first year with Todd Monken? Is that the pairing that you think that's going to work for a decade to come? Todd Monken ain't going to coach another decade. What are we saying here? You know what I mean? So if they get the new quarterback because they get the number 1 pick, maybe they move off the general manager. Even if they don't, I think Andrew Berry is like Jafar in Aladdin. He's got like the Haslams in a trance with this, serpent stick or whatever, the staff. Like, that's what's going on in Cleveland right now. And I think that he could convince him, hey, all the things you're just saying, hey, we both know that Monken was a placeholder head coach. We can't go forward with the pairing of our new quarterback and him. Let's move on and just get it over with, blah, blah, blah. And I think that he would do it. So I don't even think they need the GM to get fired for that to still be the case. But I know there was one other guy that you think could be on his way out early.
Yeah, and it's for that same GM reason. It's in Arizona with Mike LaFleur. And it's less about like that I think LaFleur is going to be some terrible coach who can't ever be a successful NFL head coach. But it's the idea that, Monty Ossenfort's been tearing that roster down. They don't really have a quarterback solution in place. I mean, unless they like trade up or I guess they could take somebody like Ty Simpson at the top of the draft and trade up in the first round. But like realistically, they don't have a very good roster around whatever quarterback they end up, if they do draft a quarterback. Like they're really set up to be a bad team this year. And if they really implode, does ownership fire the GM and then new GM wants their new head coach? Like, I don't think LaFleur is like some hopeless fool who can't get anything done, but I just feel like he's in a really tough spot for an organization that didn't blow everything up fully, but then it's treating their roster like they're blowing everything up fully. So it's a weird kind of mix of like, unless the GM really feels like he has some assurances for the long term, and I don't know why he would or should, unless he's got the same genie lamp that Andrew Berry and Chris Ballard have in the general manager ranks.
He may not be just a bumbling fool with no chance, but I think he's closer to that than he is being Sean McVay. So, I think that when you have a coach, and I don't want to like psychoanalyze, but LaFleur just doesn't have that leadership look to him, in my opinion. He looks a little too young, doesn't look like he commands the room. And when you have that type of coach, who I think is too nice, not somebody that people fear, and you're going into the season with Jacoby Brissett and Gardner Minshew as your quarterback, you are telling your locker room, players like Budda Baker, players like Trey McBride, players like James Conner, you're telling those players from the jump, we have no chance this season. Nothing you do is going to matter. We're not going to be a winning team this season. So when you have a coach who I don't think can demand respect and get a little, because a little part of respect is fear. There is a sliver of fear within the cake of respect. And when you don't have a coach who I think is going to inspire that fear and respect, and you also give your players no reason to believe going into a season, I think that's a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for locker room revolt, and it's a recipe for a coach maybe being a one and done. So I think you're 100% right. And Mike LaFleur might even be a better pick than Todd Monken.
It's just, there's such a weird situation in Arizona too, where like he retains Jonathan Gannon's defensive coordinator. So like you fired defensive head coach and bring
Nobody wanted to go there. I mean, Gus Bradley decided to come to Tennessee and be a non-play calling defensive coordinator rather than call plays for Arizona. Like, that's a bad spot.
Totally. And then you add in offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett. Like that's going to be the right-hand man to LaFleur to give you a lot of confidence. And like, first time ever quarterbacks coach Matt Schaub is going to be the one to train their quarterbacks. I mean, nothing against Matt Schaub. He's just never done the quarterback coach job before. And his boss is Hackett, who has been a pretty consistent failure in the NFL. And then LaFleur is the first time trying to do all this with young defensive coordinator that he's inheriting. That just, there's a lot of this weird machinations that just doesn't look like a cohesive plan and like a continuity of like everyone's on the same page going in the same direction.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. That's one that I got my things, and I just don't get it. I've complained about Arizona all off season. They actually had something building. And now all of a sudden they're trying to tear it all down, even though they have some good players. It's annoying to me. But anyway, that's going to do it for me and Lauren today, folks. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On NFL again. I am your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, Lauren Cox, as we tell you every episode. Thanks for tuning in, and stay safe out there.